Welcome to Lola's Frugal Life Podcast. If you're on a mission to be more frugal with both your time and money, you're in the right place. In this podcast, we talk about topics that help enhance living a frugal lifestyle. The goal is to save time and money where we can so that we can use the rest on what matters most to us. We talk a lot about both time and money management so that we can waste as little as possible on both. We do this while also embracing a progress over perfection mindset. If that sounds good to you, then please stick around for the latest episode right after a few quick words from our sponsor. Hi everyone, welcome back to Lola's Frugal Life Podcast. Before we get into today's topic about considering if you're throwing away any money on food, I just wanted to share another review that I got on Apple Podcast, because again, I'm always so appreciative when I get these reviews. So I just wanted to share. I got another one. I was super excited. It's a 5-star review, and it was given by Teacher Wendy. And she says, practical advice from a real person. I'm pretty sure that's what it said. I can't see it on my phone for some reason. That top section cuts off, but I looked it up on iTunes on my computer because I want to see what it said. And I think it says practical advice from a real person. Anyway, she says, I appreciate Lola's practical, doable tips and advice. Some podcasts on budgeting and frugal living feature advice that doesn't seem realistic for my busy schedule. I really enjoy her episodes featuring time management tips. So thank you so much. You have no idea how excited I literally get when I see that I got another review on Apple Podcasts, because it really does help get the show out to more people, and I'm trying so hard to do that. So when you do leave a review like that, especially a good one like that one was, super nice. I really appreciate it. And I know it takes time to actually go out of your way to do that. So thank you so much for leaving that. And if any of you haven't left a review yet and you have a minute or two, I would really appreciate it, because like I said, I am really trying to grow this show and get it out to more people. So that is really much appreciated. So anyway, let's get into today's episode topic, which is, are you throwing money away on food? So of course, as we all know, food waste costs us money. None of us want to waste money on groceries. And there's other reasons to feel bad about wasting food, besides the fact that it impacts our budget, because it just feels bad to waste food. I mean, no one wants to waste food, but we have to also consider what it's doing to the amount of money we're spending on groceries. The cost of groceries have risen so much in the recent amount of time, and now it's even more important to make sure we're wasting as little food as possible, because we don't want to be buying these groceries at such high prices and then end up not being able to eat them. Because every time we buy food and end up throwing it in the trash, we just really have to remind ourselves that we could have used that money on something else. But at the same time, we do have to remind ourselves that zero food waste is not the goal. While obviously it would be great to never have to put any food in the trash, there are just times when it's going to happen. We can plan our purchases carefully. We could be super intentional about making sure we use up what we buy, but there's still always going to be some times when food ends up going to waste. Maybe you bought produce that you thought was fresher than it actually was, and it went bad much quicker. Maybe you accidentally shoved a leftover to the back of the fridge and no one saw it until it was too late. Maybe you had so many leftovers from dinner to use up for lunches that the lunch meat you bought never got eaten. There's times that things just happen, and we can't be super hard on ourselves. We just want to make sure that we are taking the steps that we can do as much as possible to make sure that we use up as much of the food as we purchase that we can. But at the same time, we don't want to beat ourselves up when it does happen, because I used to always get so upset whenever I had to throw something out. And then I finally, tried to remind myself, I do everything I can to not waste food. Sometimes this just happens and I just have to throw it out and not sit there feeling terrible about it. So, just kind of keep that in mind as you're trying to improve on wasting less food and making sure you're using up everything you buy. Just also be kind to yourself and knowing that sometimes things just happen, and there is going to be some level of food waste most likely in your household. And don't forget to, it's not just perishable items that go to waste. I think often when we think about food waste, we're thinking of like fresh fruit and vegetables or leftovers from meals that wind up ending up in the trash. But if we don't manage the contents of our freezer and our pantry, those things can definitely end up going bad too. So even though they're able to be stored for a much longer amount of time, they still have a limited lifespan. And if we don't make sure we manage those areas too, we can wind up not only wasting fresh food that went bad too quickly, but we can also wind up having things sitting in our freezer and pantry that end up having to get thrown out. And those all cost money too. So we just really need to make sure that we're managing both using up our fresh food and also things that are in our fridge and freezer. So of course, my number one tip for wasting less food is meal planning. As many of you know who listen to this podcast for a little while know, I'm a huge fan of the benefits of meal planning. And in my experience, the most helpful thing to reduce food waste has been planning our meals. So of course, I'm not saying it's not impossible to just go to the grocery store and buy things randomly and actually eat them all up. But if you go in without a game plan, it's much more likely you're going to buy things that end up not getting used because you don't have a plan for what you're going to do with them. So the more detailed your plan is, the better it's going to the better it's going to be for you in ensuring that you're going to use up the groceries because you have a plan for what you're going to do with each of those ingredients. You're not just going into the store and picking up random things and thinking you might make meals with them. So as far as meal planning though, before you even go to the grocery store, the biggest tip that I have learned too related to meal planning is to always shop from your freezer or your pantry first to see what you already have. And that will help with using up those things that could go bad in the future because you forgot they were in there. So maybe in your freezer you might have some frozen meat, some frozen vegetables, or maybe in your pantry you have some canned vegetables or dry pasta or rice. Look at those things that you have that aren't already about to be used in an upcoming meal and plan meals in your next week's grocery meal plan, in your next week's meal plan to use up some of those ingredients. You want to always be making sure you're using up what you have on hand first before you go and buy more ingredients because that's going to ensure that those things get used up before they go bad. And then another tip with meal planning is always make sure to plan to use up perishable items earlier in the week and then use things that last longer later in the week. So you want to make sure that you use fresh vegetables and fruit that are going to go bad quickly earlier in the week from when you go food shopping, and then use like your frozen vegetables or whatever other things you're going to make later in the week because the quicker you can use those up, the less likely that there's a chance they're going to go bad. Even if they are very fresh, you still just want to use them up as quick as you can. It kills me when I accidentally plan to use fresh vegetables on like a Friday and I do it. I try to be so careful, but I just forget sometimes and I still wind up doing it because what happens is I grocery shop on Thursday, but I shop for the ingredients through the following Friday. That way, in case for some reason I can't get out to the grocery store on Thursday like I normally do, at least I have a backup day where I've already purchased the groceries through like the following day. So if I plan to cook something with fresh vegetables on Friday, that means I've already had them now for a week and a day. What I could do is wait and purchase them the following Thursday, but I don't think that way because when I do my meal plan and my grocery list, I run the meal plan. I have an app that I keep my meal plans in, and I run the groceries needed for the meals for that Saturday through the following Friday. And that's what I shop for on Thursday. So in my mind, I'm not remembering that there might be some of those vegetables on there that I'm not planning to use until Friday. And then by the time Friday comes, it's too late because it's been like over a week. And sometimes they're okay, but they're still not at their freshest. And other times they've gone bad. So I'm trying to be better about that and really making sure that I do not sorry, I'm just laughing because I'm actually recording in my car because I've gotten so tired of just not being able to find anywhere in my house. And as I'm sitting in the car, I see my 2 dogs looking at me like out the window thinking, what on earth is she doing in her car just sitting there? They're like so confused. So sorry, it just made me laugh when I looked over and saw them. But anyway, I'm really trying to get better about remembering to not plan to make fresh vegetables or, other perishable ingredients later in the week. So just kind of keep that in mind. And then also with meal planning too, there's going to be times where you're going to have to skip a meal because either you just got too busy and you wind up having to order in pizza or whatever, or, whatever happens. You had too many leftovers from the night before. There's going to be times when you have a meal that you had on your meal plan and you're going to wind up not cooking it and using those groceries. So when that happens, just be mindful about how you manage the rest of the week. If you were planning on making a salad with fresh ingredients today and you wind up not being able to cook that today, and then maybe tomorrow you had something with ingredients that are frozen, well then don't make that meal tomorrow with ingredients that are frozen, because that could be used anytime, like next week or in a couple days or whatever. Switch your meal plan around so that you make sure you use up those perishable items and don't just skip that meal and then forget about the fact that you had purchased those groceries. You really want to kind of be mindful about what and when you're cooking and making changes as needed to use up those groceries that are going to go bad. And of course, you also want to always check your fridge frequently to see what needs to be used up, because a lot of times you might have something like maybe you have some sour cream in the fridge that you bought for, I don't know, tacos or something, or maybe you have some extra cheese or too many eggs or whatever it might be that you have in there. You might want to think about what you could do with those ingredients to start using them up. Like if you have too many eggs, maybe you want to make some hard-boiled eggs to use up for lunches or snacks or salads. Maybe if you have too much cheese, you might decide you're going to make some grilled cheese sandwiches for lunch one day. Or maybe you can put out some cheese and crackers to have as a snack. You just want to kind of look and be creative and think of ways that you can use up those kind of I don't know what you call them. They're not really staples, but I guess those other types of ingredients that you might have in your fridge that you don't want to let sit there too long and you want to make sure you're using them up. And then see if you have any other leftovers that you could use as a side dish with your current meal tonight. Maybe you had a little bit of leftover pasta from the night before, and it might not be a side dish you would typically serve with whatever meal it is you're making tonight, but who cares? Just put it out anyway. I have done that so many times where I'll just kind of heat up little bits of random food that were left over from the night before. And usually someone winds up eating it, or at least a good portion of it. So even if some does wind up getting wasted, it's less. Someone usually winds up eating some of whatever I wind up putting out on the counter. So, even if you don't have leftovers to use as a main dish, put them out as sides. Maybe you have a small amount of, I don't know, whatever, if you made chicken or something last night and you have a little bit left over, but it's not enough left over for a whole meal, maybe you could put a little bit of it out, and maybe someone liked that better than whatever you made tonight. So you never know. People seem to wind up eating food if it's kind of taken out and heated up and put out for them, rather than if it's just kind of left in the fridge. And then also don't forget to check the condiments and the jarred items too. If you have some dressing to use it up, maybe you can make a salad. If you have some pickles that need to get eaten, maybe just remember to put them out next time you make hamburgers or hot dogs. Often just kind of taking a look in there can really just help us remember what we have and make sure that we're using it up. And then another tip to throw away less groceries is to make sure that you're storing food in a way that promotes less food waste, meaning that you're going to see it. You want to try and organize your foods in a way so that you know what you have. One thing you could definitely do is try to keep like items together, because that makes it so much easier to see exactly what you have. If you have all of your penne pasta together, or all of your cans of corn, or vegetables, or whatever you have in your pantry or freezer, if you keep them together, you can quickly look and see where they're at. But if you have things stored all over the place, you're not going to know what you have easily, and you might wind up buying more of things that you already have. And then that's going to increase the chances of food going to waste because now you have this excess that might not get used up in time, even for those items with the longer shelf lives. So for me, the most challenging food storage in the past was with my chest freezer. Whenever I would get a package of meat, I would divide it up and I'd put it in the chest freezer, and there would just be meat like everywhere, like because it's just like this big open space, and there would just be stuff everywhere. And then when I would go to meal plan, I would be trying to figure out what I needed, and I would kind of just be digging through the freezer, and everything was all piled on top of everything, and I had no idea like what I had or where to even look, and it was just awful. I hated it. I loved having the space to store the food, but I hated this just like mass of stuff. So what I wound up doing is I did some searching online, and I've shared this tip before, but it's one of my favorites, so I always like to share it in case it might help someone else. I looked online for how to organize your chest freezer, and someone had, I don't remember if I even posted it in a Facebook group or whatever, I don't remember. Somehow I found this tip, and it was to use canvas grocery bags to organize your chest freezer. And that's what I started doing, and it was such a huge difference for me to know exactly what I have. I got light-colored bags. I took a Sharpie marker and wrote like chicken, ground beef, pork chops, whatever. And those ingredients go in those bags. So I have like one bag that has chicken breast in it, because I tend to buy in like bigger quantities. So if I'm buying chicken for this week, I'm not just going to get it for this week. I'm going to get the bigger package so that it's cheaper, and then I'll freeze the rest for a future week or weeks or whatever. So when I go to check and see what I have in the freezer, I can just go in the freezer, and it's so easy. I can literally just lift all of those bags out and just place them on the floor real quick and get to whatever I need to see. And then I could just look in the bag that has the chicken breast in it and be like, oh, okay, I already have 3 packages of chicken breast here, so I don't need to buy that. Where before, I had no idea. I would just be searching around and be like, oh, okay, there's one here. I don't know, maybe I need more, maybe I don't. So just doing that and being able to easily just lift the bags out and get to what I need made it such a big difference for me. And I always use up what's in that freezer now. Nothing gets left in there and gets freezer burned because I couldn't find it or couldn't get to it. So just think about like how you're storing your food, and if there's a better way to store it so that, one, you could see what you have so that you know for sure what you have, and 2, that you have it in a way that you're using the oldest things first. And then as far as freezing foods, you know, there's many leftovers that can be frozen, but you need to make sure you freeze them before it's too late. So again, it goes back to just being mindful and thinking, if you have something in the fridge that was maybe from yesterday, you know, and it's something that could be frozen, think about like, is this actually going to get eaten? Who's going to eat this? If there's like no plans that food's going to get eaten and it's something that can be frozen, then freeze it right away, because it really stinks to have something that could have easily been frozen and eaten later, but you had to wind up throwing it out because you didn't take the time to freeze it when it was still fresh enough. And then make sure you freeze things in small enough portions that you can use them up. So like some of the things I really love to freeze is like chili, pulled pork, French dip, pasta sauce, certain soups, not with pasta in it, but like, you know, certain kinds of soups freeze really well. Just freeze them in portions that you can easily use them. You don't want to save a huge portion that you wind up taking out and then having to throw out half of it because only a little bit of it was able to be eaten. A lot of times I like to save things in like lunch portions so that I could just maybe take out like a small, like maybe it's like soup or like chili, or like I said, like French dip sandwiches. I'll just have a small like lunch portion, and then maybe on the weekend we're looking for something for lunch, I'll get some rolls and then just take that out and defrost it, and now we have lunch. So just kind of make sure that when you're freezing things, you're freezing them in ways that they will actually be used and that you won't still have to wind up throwing out a big portion of them. And then always make sure too that you go through that freezer once you put those things in there and see what's in there. Again, you want to maybe keep those things together. Like I have a separate bag for kind of like those leftovers so that I can look in there and see what I have that needs to get used up, and then I'll make myself a note like use up French dip for lunch this weekend, Or I had made this big thing of crock pot chili a couple weeks ago, and I froze it in portions. And sometimes when we do hot dogs for dinner, I'll do a can of chili, but instead I reminded myself that I had those frozen portions of the homemade chili. So then I just made myself a note, so that I would remember to use that and not open up a can of chili. So just kind of, really be thinking about what can you get in the freezer before it's too late, and then making a plan to make sure you use it up. And there are many things that can go into the freezer that, before you're ready to use them. Some things that I freeze on a regular basis so that I just know I never have to worry about them going bad, because I do use them regularly. It's not like I stick them in there forever, but I know that as long as I get them in the freezer, they'll wind up getting used before there's any chance of it being too late. Some things are like bread, both white bread, Italian bread. I freeze fresh rolls and loaves of bread. Fresh, they're like pretty much almost exactly the same the day you take them out and defrost them as they were when you froze them. Bananas, sometimes I buy bananas and they get eaten up super quick, and then other times they just sit there. So when we end up with excess bananas, I just peel them and put them in a Ziploc bag, and then I use them for smoothies or any recipes that require ripe bananas. And I put multiple bananas in one bag. I've never had a problem just breaking them apart to put them in a smoothie or whatever. Baby spinach, sometimes I need baby spinach for a recipe and then I don't end up using the whole bag. So if I don't end up feeding it to our guinea pigs, I stick it in a Ziploc bag and freeze it. And it's really great for smoothies, again, or any recipes that call for frozen spinach. I've used it in recipes instead of frozen chopped spinach, and it works totally perfectly. You can freeze milk. I don't do that normally, but during 2020, when the kids started doing remote schooling because of COVID, the schools were sending home milk for every kid every day. And it was an enormous amount of milk. And not only did my kids get it, but my neighbor's kid, who doesn't drink milk, was getting it also. So every time they would get their allotment of milk, they would come give it to us. And I had all this milk, and being the way I am, struggling with wasting food, like hating to throw things out unless I absolutely have to, I looked up what to do with this milk, and I saw that you could freeze it. So we wound up freezing all those little milk boxes or whatever you call them, that you get from the school. And we froze them as we had excess, and then we just would defrost one or two at a time, and they were completely fine. We ended up using up all of those milks. So if for some reason you end up with milk, and I think my mom actually even does this. She's retired and lives on her own, and so she doesn't want to run out all the time for milk, but she also doesn't use a ton. So I think I could swear that I think she said she freezes milk too in smaller portions and then defrosts it as needed. But that was definitely great to do at that time, and we were able to use it all up without having to waste any of it. So again, like with everything, just make small changes. If you feel like you might be struggling with throwing away uneaten food, just start by making small improvements. Try and figure out what is it that causes you to waste food most frequently, and what can you do to change it. An example for me was with lunch meat. I kept buying lunch meat for our house. Some weeks it would get eaten in a few days, and other weeks I'd end up throwing away an unopened package of lunch meat, and it would kill me because lunch meat is so expensive. I would throw away a package of turkey that would say $12 on it, and it wasn't even open, and I would just have to toss it in the trash because no one wound up eating it. And I always wanted to have it available if someone wanted to make a sandwich, but then it was getting to the point where I was like, this is costing a fortune for me to buy lunch meat and put it in the fridge, and then people wind up not eating it. Because our schedule is just not always completely predictable at this time in our life. So sometimes people are here to eat it. Sometimes people wind up eating their lunch when they're out. Sometimes there's leftovers and they're eating that. So I just decided, rather than having the convenience of someone being able to make a sandwich if they want it, I just stopped buying lunch meat. If someone specifically asks me to get it, my one daughter was going to be making sandwiches to take with her to school. So for that, I said, okay, she's like, can you get me turkey or can you get me ham? So I was like, okay, because I knew specifically she was going to be using it. But other than that, I just stopped buying it unless there was a specific request, because I felt like if we really need it, we can go run up to the local store, like the local, like little, like convenience store, and get some lunch meat. And yes, the price is going to be higher by doing it that way, but it's still better than continually throwing out lunch meat that's not even getting touched. So maybe there's a small change like that you can make to help lessen the amount of food that you waste in your home. Because like I said, not only does it feel terrible to waste food because it just feels bad to just watch food go in the trash, but it costs so much money. And especially now that groceries are so expensive, it's even more important to really try and make sure that we're using up everything we purchase so that we can not have a huge impact on our budgets by not getting to use the food that we're buying with our limited amount of money. So that's all I have to say today about this topic. I hope this was helpful to you, and I will see you back here next week. So thank you for checking in for this podcast episode, and don't forget, you can always email me with any questions or suggestions at lolasfrugallife@gmail.com. You can follow me on Instagram and Facebook at lolasfrugallife, and you can find a blog post for most of my episodes and definitely all of my meal plan episodes at lolasfrugallife.com. You can also join our private listeners group at facebook.com/groups/lolasfrugallife. And if you enjoy the show, please make sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you listen from. And I would love it if you would screenshot the show and tag me on Instagram so I could see you're listening. Also, if you can please take a couple of seconds to rate and review the podcast. Those ratings and reviews are what help the show come up better in search results so that other people can find this podcast. So that will really help me in growing my audience. So that's it for today. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you have an awesome day.